Greetings, everyone. I'm Mar. Once again, this is my opinion. Now we come to another pretty good episode that I'd actually say is a great episode, but it falls short of being a classic episode when you really think about the logic behind the twist at the end. And this is something I never really thought about the twist until I got older, and I'm like, you know what? Maybe not. That, of course, is episode 19 of season 2, Good Girls. And considering the whole topic behind this episode and the revelation, it is a very apt title. And this is another episode with a commentary by Ray Romano and Phil Rosenthal, and it is a pretty insightful commentary. A couple parts they're talking about a little bit of the writing room, the creative process, and they point out something that I haven't brought up on any of these videos yet, and that was they didn't get Emmy nominations for the first couple. They go into the fact that you could have great episodes on a sitcom for the first couple, but because it's that early in the run, they might not get the recognition they deserve. And how this episode, for example, if they had done this episode later in the show's run, like season 8 is what they say, it probably would have gotten Emmy nominations out the wazoo. It is kind of right. That's a sad thing. I don't think it's mainly a sitcom thing, but I think other genres they can get them out the wazoo at first, but it's usually probably on the technical things. But that's the thing with, you can go win that rant with any type of thing. Like, I personally think, like, certain genres of films seem to get the shaft when it comes to some of the higher tier Oscars. Although there'll be occasional things like Lord of the Rings and Star Wars getting Best Supporting Actor nominations, or even Blazing Saddles getting a Best Supporting Actress nomination. Good Girls, the present. Good Girls' premise starts very simple. Perfect way to begin the episode. That it's Marie and Amy really getting along. Marie doing her usual shtick to Debra. Another meal, get away from you, dear. You know how she's been. When this far into the show, we know what Marie's about. Even though a couple episodes ago we saw her go down a little bit. But that's, as I've said before, and I'll say time and again with this, that is the nature of sitcoms. You kind of go back to the status quo, even if there's a little bit of character and continuity growth. It's now the 1 year anniversary of Robert and Amy going out, so Amy's gonna be cooking a big dinner for everyone. And in the course of them arguing whether Debra has cooked over there, Frank spills the beans about why Marie and Amy seem to have this great relationship when her relationship with Debra is like, and that is Marie likes Amy more than Debra, which goes into the whole little sibling rivalry between Ray and Robert, where Robert's like, he doesn't say it, but you can tell by the look on Brad Garrett's face as he sells it. He's like, oh, I got something over Raymond. Look at Robbie go. And a fun thing about this scene that they point out in the commentary, it's the only time in the whole show, or one of the few times, that they actually build the fourth wall. Because they had to get a couple of reaction shots because of what they're doing in this scene. So they had to build the wall that doesn't exist in other shots because that's where the audience is, in order to get those reaction shots. It's a nice little touch. Well, after he finds out, Ray goes across the street, talks with Debra, tells her what happened, and of course Debra's like, maybe a little hurt, but the way that she sees it's mainly Ray reacting because, oh, mommy likes her girl more than mine, that she really nails it home. It's like, I'm just a play in your sibling rivalry, and the way she plays this off is excellent, that maybe it'll be a musical in dancing, and then, singing one singular sensation. And as they point on the commentary track, Patricia Heaton does have a great voice, and she did Broadway, so it's there and goes with her movements. Ray does eventually confront Marie about it, and she goes right into denial mode. And another little thing from the commentary track, and this is the thing that really pointed this out to me, because I would not have known this is what they were intending with how they set the scene up if I did not know this. This is one of the few times, if not the only time on the show, where they have some topical political satire. But they went about it in a way to where it's a satire, but it's still funny regardless of whether or not it's a satire or not. And the example I could think of with that is Monty Python and the Holy Grail. That a lot of the humor in that film is satirizing all the old Arthurian fantasy, codes of chivalry, all that stuff. That it's funny if you have the knowledge of what they're making fun of. Like, the dark humor in the Black Knight scene is making fun of, never fight an unarmed opponent, stuff like that. If you did not know that, the movie is still funny on its own because of the absurdity of the humor and everything, but when you know the satire, it's funnier. Now for here, they wrote it in a way that if you understand what they're making fun of, it's funny. But even if you don't understand it, it's still funny. As they said on the commentary, I believe it was Phil who said it, it's timeless. They wanted to make sure it's like that. Like, they're not going to have Ray go out and say what it is and be a little bit too on the nose. And for those of you who haven't figured it out based on what year this episode was produced, what it is, this was a satire of President Clinton during the whole Monica Lewinsky scandal, the whole, I did not have sexual relations with that woman. I can't do a good Bill Clinton impersonation. It's like, I'll define it. I did not have sexual relations with that woman. That whole thing. And if you can go into this episode with that knowledge, the way that Marie acts in this scene, her body language, her tells a little bit, you can definitely see it in the dialogue. It's like, I am not saying that I like Amy more than Debra. And then when Ray lies and says, there's a tape, give me the tape. So the way she plays it off, it's funny. It's funnier with that knowledge, though. It's like, oh, that is one of course the first thing I thought of when I heard that. I'm like, well, that explains a lot about this scene. What makes this even funnier and absurd? I know people are going to go, Marie, absurd? What isn't absurd about her behavior? Fair point. But this just makes it a little bit more absurd, is her justification for why she likes Amy more than Debra. Has nothing really to do with her personality and all that. It has to do with the simple fact that she is a good girl. That's the euphemism they use for here. And it's an approach we'll see multiple times on this show. We'll see it in the next season, one of my favorite episodes in that season, the Halloween Candy one. And that is that you get your point across without actually saying the word, because it's funnier that way. And what I mean by that is that Amy is a virgin. 33. And a virgin. Which Ray's like, there's no way. No way? Yeah, there's a way, but it's surprising. Which in modern days, yeah. I mean, in the olden days, there probably were people of both genders that weren't and played off that they were. But back then, it was less socially acceptable. Some places it probably still is now, but it's more socially acceptable, or people don't harp against you as much. And a lot of the euphemisms and stuff they use, like Ray saying, well, Amy's never let anybody cook in her kitchen either. That line still gets me rolling, just the way that Ray says it. But when you hear that that's the reason that Marie likes her better and how she tries to add onto it, it's like, it tells me about her character, what kind of person she is. Really? I really wouldn't say that. I'd say the main reason, based on what we know about Amy from the episode she's been in, that she is that she hasn't found a partner that would be in for the long term that she feels comfortable dealing with that with. Which that goes a little bit into her personality, but not the way that you're trying to say, Marie. It seems more like you're trying to justify why you do that just for one thing that you suspect, and of course, as we find out is accurate, about Debra, that she would not be able to match. Just your judgmental attitude. And as we're going to find out in a later scene, another little bit of something. Well, Ray decides to lie, and during the dinner scene, Marie is actually a little bit nicer to Debra following the lie, and that is Ray says, oh, you were a good girl too. Which I'm skipping over a scene because it's just Debra finding out. It's a very funny scene too, both ways. Well, during this dinner scene, Ray finally decides, I'm tired of this. I lied just because I wanted my mother to treat Debra better, but it's getting a little bit too creepy for me. Debra's not selling it well, so she confesses it. And everything unravels. Everyone finds out the reason why Marie likes Amy better, finding out that Amy's a virgin. Which, the only time the word virgin is used in this episode is tongue-in-cheek, and that's when Debra says extra virgin olive oil. Perfect way to slide it in there. Find out Marie asked Robert and everything, her caring about everything, her trying to justify it to everyone, which leads into the big reveal of the episode. We haven't gotten to the big reveal yet? Those of you who haven't watched the episode? Those of you who have, you're like, oh yeah, it gets better. And that is with all of her justifications, Marie's a hypocrite because I'm going to use the actual dialogue. I take exception to what you think, Marie. Just because you were a good girl in the 50s, insert Frank. Good girl. Ha. That's right. Marie had sexual congress with Frank before they were married. And everyone's reaction to this, Ray, Brad, Patricia, Monica, they all sell this beautifully. And when they confront Marie, I love the look on Monica's face as Amy when Marie's all like panicking, looking around, like crossing her arms. She's like, "Go ahead, Marie. I won't tell anyone." Just the way she says that, so dry, with a little bit of venom behind it, is like, God, it's so satisfying to see Marie backed into her corner, and then she has to tell everyone the truth. You know that she did have intercourse with Frank. She does try to justify it a little bit. I was weak. I fell for Frank's boyish good looks. And if she tries to go in more of it, Frank is just very blunt. He wanted intercourse. And that's bombshell number one. Bombshell number two is a little bit more sharp. And that is, as Frank puts it, it was just the once and then we had to get married. And the thing I love about this is Ray's the one that picks up on that implication first. Because as it turns out, they don't use the term, and they never go into detail to how many people exactly knew other than them. I'm sure their parents probably knew. And maybe it was a greater family they didn't know. But because of Robbie's conception, they essentially had to get married to save face. This would have been back in the 50s, so you can kind of see why. Nowadays, it'd be one of those things like married just to save face. Well, if it floats your boat. If not, you got to figure something out. So far, this whole little revelation doesn't cause a problem. Because they're like, oh yeah, it probably happened back then. Something you can see happening, especially with how Frank and Marie are not wanting to broadcast it. But then, as more part of this revelation comes out, and you sit and think about it, then you get to see why it is a little bit of an issue. Now, in order to hide it from the boys, because think about it, Robert's over 40, Ray's almost 40, and this is them just finding this out. You would think that if there wasn't some extra steps taken to hide it, you would find out stuff like this. Like, there's a couple instances of this in my family. I'm not going to bring up people, but one of them actually found out just by doing simple math. Like, wait a minute. Oh. I mean, simple like that. Even a kindergartner could figure it out if they know their math and the implication. So how did they hide it from the boys? Well, they lied about when Robert's birthday was. They told it was a couple months after it actually was. See the issue yet? The issue is that at this point in his life, Robert would have long since had access to his birth certificate. And unless they want to get in trouble for forging a document, his birth certificate should have his actual birth date on it. Which at one point Robert would have been like, wait a minute, this isn't right. Ma! Gone and confronted Marie, and then Marie would have to have gone with the truth. I mean, even if he didn't read it himself, at one point he would have to sign a document and been like, oh, Mr. Barone, on your thing you put your birth date was there, but on your birth certificate it says, let me see that. Ma! But nope, that didn't happen. And this is pointed out on IMDb. Probably would have been easy for them to lie about their wedding date than their birth date. It would have been easier to get, parents on both sides to go along, although I'm sure Nani Barone probably would have spilled the beans eventually, given how horrible of a woman she was. An even worse version of Marie before Marie, as everything points out. But it could have been a little bit easier to go along. I mean, if they said something, they kept silent about Robert being illegitimate, I'm sure they would have kept quiet about this, but it would have been so much easier. But the way they went about it, it's so convoluted. But the way that Maurice justifies is like, it was easier this way, Robbie. I could see her thinking this would be the easier way, and that's the only way it makes sense logically. But it's still one of those things like, why would they try to lie about that? It just would not work in the long term. For him finding out like this is a conversation that probably should have happened when Ray and Robert were in their teens. Like, inviting over his first teenage girlfriend, they're talking about it, they get into an argument, and then it leads to this. Not this late in their life. unless Robert just never had his birth certificate and then they just auto-corrected it without talking to him. There's so many things that would have had to line up and happen for Robert to not have found out something that led to him confronting Marie about this. IMDb actually listed as a plot hole, which, yeah, kind of borders it. I don't know 100% if I would call it one or not, but it's in that area. It's just one of those things that doesn't quite make sense. Unless you just had the perfect storm and everything lined up. That's the only way. And like I said, it would have been much easier to lie about the wedding date. Now, even with that, all the humor, the writing, the drama, everything make this a good episode. But this revelation does drop it down, like I said at the beginning of this review. So where I'd say it's like a very good episode, bordering on great, depending on where you want to place it, depending on how you view the logistics of this twist. I'd probably put it in the lower to mid-tier of the great episodes, but it keeps it, for me, from going into an undisputed classic episode here. But like what they mentioned in the commentary, later season it probably would have gotten nominations out the wazoo, which you could see why. Now, it does end on a very touching moment that continues the revelation, and this is one of those ones that just adds to everything piling on top, and that is that we find out his birthday is April 6th, which by happenstance is that day. And the thing that I love about it is that Ray is the one that starts singing happy birthday. Slow at first and everyone joins in, it goes. It's a very genuinely sweet moment. And I think it shows that deep down inside, this family cares about each other. And for Ray to start it, it shows he does genuinely care about his brother. And this is something we'll see back and forth throughout the show, that each brother cares about the other. Like, I mean, a few episodes ago, we saw Robert loan Ray $3,000. I mean, he was gloating about it still. The fact he still did it shows he does love his brother. And in later episodes, we'll see other stuff. Very genuinely heartfelt moment. And following Ray's on TV in Civil War, this is another Tucker Carlson episode this season. He's got a couple more coming up. And on the commentary, they actually talk about how they got him for this show. That he started as a writer's assistant, then all the meetings back in the writer's room, he eventually started writing episodes proper. And of course, he would still write with Ray later on. He wrote a couple episodes of Men of a Certain Age and other stuff for TV, so his career's still going on. Now, I don't really fully blame him for my little problems with the twist, but it's just one of those things that they seem to I think they're focusing more on the joke and the implications and some of the logic with it. But as I've said before, sitcom writing. The way it's revealed, though, also Tucker did pull off how it's written, and it goes off to where you can suspend your disbelief for the time. But then as you think on it more, it kills it a little bit, but you're still able to go with it. And most of that is the dialogue and how the actors pull it off. There's not really much else to say about this episode. Definitely one that you should watch. One I've never skipped. And definitely one of my favorites of this season. I cannot say the same about the next episode, even though it has a very prolific guest star in it. And it is a situation you could probably run into if you are a parent of a child who is in sports. But it's just one of those ones, just the concept and the way it's executed. I could probably count on one hand how many times I've watched this episode. And that, of course, is T-Ball. One I always skip.